Father, we gather to this morning here to bring your praises and honor to your holy name. Thanking you for another day of life. Father, please forgive all of our sins, all of our unrighteousness, all of our iniquity, blot them out. Impart unto us your sweet Holy Spirit and your grace. And please bless your servant, Brother Parminder, with the light, with the heavenly manna, Lord, that we all are desiring to eat this morning. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
At the end of yesterday's study, we began to see that there are a number of threads that we can begin to draw together in our reform line. What we've seen is that we can go into Daniel 11 and take these repeat and enlargements, and we've got the years and the verses here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, and they all have their different themes. And we were seeing how we could make some kind of present day application. So we had one time period here between 533 and 538, but that actually takes you back to 321. It's a combination of verse 24, but really verse 30. We've looked at verse 30. We see that it's this economic and religious war, and what's really behind this is there's a struggle between Rome and the Vandals. The papacy is becoming the state religion here. It's going to be enshrined in law, and there's an attack on the Sabbath that's going on. We can see that it really begins back in 321, and the reason we're making the connection with 321 is because verse 30 begins after verse 24. So verse 24 is this time that pagan Rome is going to rule for. Verse 25 to 28 takes you back to the beginning of this, and then verse 29 takes you to the end, then into verse 30. So we're marking verse 30 as a time period from 330 to 534, which is the period of the Vandals. And we saw that the Vandals come on the scene in Eastern Europe from Scandinavia in the year 330 AD, and they come to their demise in the war that starts in 533 and ends in 534. It takes about 6 or 7 months for the Byzantine Empire to subjugate the Vandals right at the very end. So we saw this history here, and we know that there's a connection between 321 and 538. We know that these are 2 Sunday laws. So anyway, coming back to this, we know that from 533 to 538, there's this setting up period that's going on. And this setting up period can also be connected to the year 321. And 321 and 538 are connected to the Sabbath as well. Then we've seen a number of verses that deal with the issue of 508 to 538. We've seen that in 1131, 1211, 8:12. All of these verses are dealing with the same history that take you from 508 to 538. And I don't know if anybody's given it any thought, what we could see that's really happening in this time period between 508 and 538 when the daily is taken away. We saw a number of things were happening in 508. What did we see was what events are happening in 508? King Arthur is the final seventh, is the last of the 7 horns that comes over. We've seen that Clovis takes away the daily, the Visigoths are subjugated, and the Goths basically make a peace treaty with him. and Catholicism is exalting itself in Constantinople. They've gone so bold that they're actually able to challenge the authority of the government. So all of those things are happening in 508, and then by the time you get to 508, he's been placed or he's been set up. Yes, so that's what we've got, the daily taken away. But we wanted to see what that actually meant, because here we've got some key events that are happening. So it seems we've got a lot of history in verse 30, and I was trying to come up with a theme of this 508 to 538, and the best we managed to do yesterday was to say it was some kind of political setting up. So I don't know if anybody knows had any thoughts since then. So what we started looking at was, before we move on, let's see what things are happening. We've got 533 to 534. Catholicism is being enshrined in law, and the whole issue about how people in the Roman Empire are going to relate and be treated is all being defined in this period here. So in the time period where we've got this intelligence going on, we've also got statutes that are being written that are going to define how you relate to the state. There's a letter in 533 to Pope John, and he returns a letter in 534, and all of this is contained in this 4-volume set. So that's what we've got here. The law is enshrined the law enshrines the papal position. It becomes a state religion. And someone asked yesterday, is this where we begin to define Roman law? And I don't know if anybody's taken the time to actually find these books, have a perusal of them. I haven't had the chance to do that. But I suspect that this is where we're going to see the definition that we're using today about Roman law and English law. And what are we defining that as? The difference between the two.
Guilty till proven innocent, or innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah. And we saw also in 538 that Justinian is going to now force people to become Catholic by if you don't change your religion, you're going to be banished from the land, and all your property is going to be confiscated. So we then spoke about the Vandals being a representation of Islam. And at its most basic level, we're saying that the Vandals are a trumpet power, and we see a trumpet power restrained in... We've got 533, but we know it begins in 533. Carthage is taken by 533, and then the whole empire is taken by 534. So that's when the Vandals are taken. So we're seeing a restraining there of the Vandals. So we began to draw... Has anybody given this any more thought since yesterday? I've been thinking about it, but I haven't come up with any more thoughts. So I don't know how far we'll get. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to see how we can get this setting up and this setting up and the third setting up of these two Sunday laws into our reform line. So we discussed that if we're saying that the Vandals are a trumpet power that are restrained, mirroring the restraining of Islam today, that we'd be placing 533 here. And then 538 we know we've got a Sunday law. So, any thoughts on that? Any controversies? Everybody agree? I don't know.
Who's restraining the Vandals at 533 Eastern Rome? Is that where you have that underneath there? Who's actually putting the restraint on them?
How are we going to define restraint? Because here they're totally subjugated by 533, 534.
How are we going to define restraint?
How are we going to define restraint?
I mean, does the restraint have to be there? So like to say he's in there, he's in a hold. Technically there's a restraint, no them way marks.
Uh-huh.
So, could that not move over one? Even though you want to put 321 there, but I think it still can move over.
So what I'm trying to understand is, when we mark the restraining of Islam on this date here, we've got all of these events that are all happening all at once. So we're not just marking the restraint. So either we get to the situation where we're going to put the restraining of the Vandals at one place, the papacy becoming a state religion at another place, it's been enshrined in law at another place, and the Sabbath issue at another place. We'll end up having it in different places. Or we're seeing all of those things are happening in one go.
I think you can see most of them happening at 9/11.
And that's what my thoughts were. So we can see restraining, and we, as you say, we can see restraining in a number of places. Then if we're going to start talking about the papacy becomes a state religion and its position is enshrined within law, what are we saying about that?
Patriot Act.
Yeah, so we're saying, you're saying what?
I'm saying
Why is that?
because the Patriot Act, you know, the papacy is not enshrined
You
in
got to
law.
speak a bit louder because it's not going to pick up on the mic.
The papacy is not enshrined in law. And also, you know, the issue about Sabbath and Sunday and things like this, state religions, etc. Patriot Act's more like a civil, political thing. You know, you got state religion there, you got Sabbath, you know. So I think it's more midnight cry.
It's the wrong.
Because there we see the development of the Sunday laws starting.
Uh-huh. So is that in favour
I understand
of...
his logic. That's
Oh, okay.
but
This is wrong.
But I think the Patriot Act, although he's seeing a civil aspect of it, the reality of the Patriot Act is eventually to persecute Seventh-day Adventists. Just because we don't see that in the laws they were putting in to control supposed terrorism, that eventuality of that leads to the persecution of Sabbath keepers. So it's bigger than just a civil aspect. It's under darkness, it's hidden. The real meaning of the Patriot Act.
This is Tamina.
At 9/11, the Republican horn starts to fall. It's being conquered. By whom is it being conquered? It's being conquered by the King of the North. So we see that the progression starts at 9/11, even though we don't see it like clearly that there's like a law made for Sunday or something, but the conquering starts right there.
So we know that in 533, 534, Justinian writes a letter to the Pope, essentially submitting himself to the Pope, and a year later the Pope says, "You're my son and everything's okay." And so that dialogue that they have, the relationship that they're developing becomes enshrined in law. And when he writes that letter, he writes a letter before they go on their mission to subjugate the Vandals. And what's the primary reason, or what's the excuse that they're having to go and attack the Vandals? What did we say about that? Because we know the Vandals... Sorry? The ransacking of Rome is, I think, almost 100 years, 80 odd years before this. So it's not the sacking of Rome that's the issue. The king that's just come on the throne there in Carthage, he's got a vengeance against Catholics. So it's on the pretext of this religious struggle that's going on in Carthage that Justinian is going to go and attack the Vandals. It's a religious war primarily. That's the excuse that he's going to make. And just before he does that, he wants to settle things in his own country, in his own backyard, to make sure everybody knows who is who. So I don't know if that's where we see at 9/11 that the fall of the horn of republicanism is occurring there, when Justinian's handing over his kingdom, basically, all authority over to the Pope.
Why not move that letter that Justinian sends out to 1984, whenever Ronald Reagan linked with, because it's the same, it's the armies of Rome and giving their army to the papacy, and to come against what Daniel 11 was the king of the south, and to come against the Vandals who were in Egypt at the time, or sorry, not Egypt, Tunisia, which is south, it's Carthage.
So why wouldn't we bring it down to 1984?
Justinian's letter,
Yeah.
same as Ronald Reagan's stretching his hand to clasp Rome.
Are we correct to take all of these points, which are all occurring at the same time, and define whatever waymark they're going to give us as a single waymark? So we'd have to collect all of them. Otherwise, we'd be splitting up all these different. We'd have 533 right down, because there's no law issued in 1984, is there?
So the hidden.
Sorry?
The hidden. There's a different agenda underneath, behind the scenes. We don't need to see them.
Are we labeling those four things as symbols? If we're labeling them as symbols prophetically, then we have the justification to go ahead and find what they symbolize in 9/11. And I think we could find those symbols if we're labeling them as symbols.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question is: would we take each of those symbols and break them up and make them occur at different places,
I believe so.
when historically they're all occurring at one time? Because it seems to me that we're saying that at this time period here, at this date, all of these symbols are all happening all at once historically.
Is this all 533?
Yeah, 533, 534. So in that short time period, they begin a war with the Vandals. He writes a letter to the Pope. The Pope writes a letter back, and in this, between 533 and 534, they're going to enshrine that letter in law. And at this time period, the verse says in verse 30, they're going to have indignation against those who keep the Holy Covenant. There's this struggle between who's going to be the authority. Is it the people in Constantinople or the people in Rome? And even though history doesn't show us this, secular history, and even the pioneers don't address this issue because they're not Sabbath keepers. I mean, most of the information that we're going to have is Millerite, all the Millerite commentary, and they don't understand anything about the Sabbath, so they're not going to bring a Sabbath thread into this story. But when we look at it now, there's a lot of research that's been done to show us that the Sabbath is an underlying issue at the back of all of this. Brother Marco.
I get what Collis is saying. For example, the law enshrined, this is the, what do you call it, the Corpus Juris Civilis. Wikipedia says it was like a process of 10 years that Roman law was elaborated, starting 449 before Christ, and then ending up like 533. So there's a process going on, and then it comes to this point. And like even this relationship established with the papacy back in the 80s, it's a process, and then it gives us forces 1989 to the papacy. So not everything is happening actually on that very same point, but it's...
Okay, so you're saying that you want to...
Roman law was developed in the process of 10 years.
Yeah.
That's what they say. And the relationships that re-established papacy, Ronald Reagan, starts in the 80s. And it's also a process. I can understand for some reason to mark this point in 1989. This is why I say this.
Okay, so 1989.
At least some points of it.
This is wrong.
Just a question, because I'm not historically as savvy, but if they were starting to deal with the Afghanistan war, is what I understand before, and they were starting to see how terrorism is going to start affecting the United States, the Patriot Act was written in a very short period of time, which makes me believe that the Patriot Act ideas and logic had been developed over a period of time and it just came to fruition at 9/11. But based on the previous wars we've been having with radical Islam, that could be representing the lead up to 9/11 when it just finally got put down on paper. Am I wrong in understanding that?
That's how I'm seeing this thing. Brother Tyler, you have any thoughts? No one else is
The
saying
only,
anything.
I'm trying to figure out in my head if we're dealing with the space of 4 years.
Yeah.
So our dilemma right now is, do we break it up or do you keep it together? And it seems like there's an argument either way for that. But my question is, since we're dealing with such a short space of time, does that give us the justification to break it down even further, down to even the year, I guess? Because I don't know, what would be the midnight cry in the space of these 4 years? Is there anything else that happens in between there? Have we just hit all the major events?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we've hit all the major events, then maybe there's, maybe we have to span it out a little bit more, but I don't know.
So you're saying there may be 535, 536, there might be another waymark. Is that?
I'm saying, either there's another waymark in that time that we're not seeing at this very moment, or maybe we do have to separate some of those and show a progression that goes a little bit deeper than just 533 as one waymark, but 533 from 9/11 to a little bit further. I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure that out in my head too.
So if we've got no more thoughts on that, we'll leave that here at the moment, and then maybe we'll come up with some.
About the Vandals yesterday, you said they typify Islam. But Islam is throughout the whole board from 1989 to the Sunday Law and beyond. But the Vandals are only basically at 9/11, aren't they? They don't really have a place on the other waymarks.
I think this might be talking to the issue that Brother Tyler's bringing up. When you see this war that's going on, they come in 533, and there's a number of battles that lead you to the final destruction of the Vandals. It's not just a single battle. There's at least 3, maybe 4 battles. So I don't know if that's this kind of progressive restraining of the Vandals that we might be able to understand. But whatever date we're going to put on it at the moment, I think we have enough license to say where are we going to start. That this history here, the restraining of the Vandals, is this verse 30 is talking about our history. There's enough information that we have about that, Brother Tyler.
The way I've been approaching it in the last couple of days since we've been looking at it, at least in my own personal study, is I'm under the impression that all the barbarians from Alaric, Genseric, Odoacer, Attila, all represent Islam. So, me personally, I've I guess zoomed out a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying this is interesting because to answer Allison's question, that I think all the barbarians typify Islam on various levels. If you line it up prophetically. But what we're doing right here is we're zooming in on a very particular point in history and expanding it over this whole period.
When you say they all represent, are you happy to put them on a line?
Yeah.
So where would you put them?
1980. This is already what we understand. At least
Yeah.
if you just do the 4 trumpets, you do 1989 to 9/11 is the first, so that's Alaric with the Goths. And then you have the Vandals to the Midnight Cry with Genseric. You have Attila, and then you have Odoacer or Odoacer, however you pronounce his name, from the Sunday Law forward. Now,
I never heard that.
No? It's new to me.
Really? This is okay. This is the number 4. This is based upon the number 4.
Okay.
If you do
So
all
the-
the number 4s, the
ODA.
yeah, Odoacer, or however you say him, the Hirulak, easiest. And then we've already also understood that from 1989 to this same time period is overlaid with the 3 trumpets, the 5th, 6th, and 7th, which is obviously Islam. So this same period of time, we're seeing 2 groups that, in my mind, are symbolizing the same people doing different aspects of the work. It goes to right before, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, mixed with the woes. So that's how I'm
I'm just going
looking
to
at
put it here
Yeah,
because we're
it's
not.
easier.
Yeah,
pointing up
we're not
here,
introducing the idea of the
the woes.
of midnight.
Yeah, that's fine.
So here we've got the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and the 4th, and the 5th and the 6th.
hmm
7.
And
we-
7th you can show as well. That's close of probation.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to go that far at the moment.
Okay,
but
so-
it's there.
So one thing we notice is that these 4 trumpets, excluding this one, they're in the reverse order that they're actually plucked up in. So there's reversal there. I don't know what that means. I've noticed that. But if we're saying that this is the Vandals, we're placing the Vandals at 9/11, which puts it in, which is in agreement with what we're suggesting. So I don't know if, so to me, I don't know if that helps to verify that we should be placing it at 9/11.
There, everybody else is Jin Sarek, then Attila, and Odoacer. Is there someone specific that was brought down in 533 of the Vandals? Was there a leader?
I should put the Huns. By 533
Who
of
was
the
that
Vandals,
guy?
yeah. The reason why I put them down, because when we think about these leaders, often the person at the end isn't the most famous one that we think about. I'll give you his name. He's somebody you've probably never heard of.
In what context did you study this? Is it in a camp meeting or is it?
This is the
Classic.
number. This is the number 4 in terms of the 4 generations of Joel. Well,
Didn't Mark send that one?
yeah, Mark's done it. I've done it. I thought it was a little bit more readily understood, but I guess not. Maybe we should do something on it.
Was it in
it's-
class or was it in the camp meeting?
Camp meeting for sure, and then various different speaking engagements from camp meetings.
Parminder.
1 second, let me just write this king's name down.
And while you're writing that down, I can give a little bit more to help some of them out. An interesting thing is with the Vandals at 9/11, you have the ships of Chittim is how they're represented in Daniel 11, but in in Revelation 8, they're the mountain and thrown into the sea, and we know that at this point right here, this is when the ships of Tarshish sink from 9/11 onwards. So it's the work of the Vandals at that time. Also, another proof to show this line that we're doing is that the Huns, Attila is described as bitterness, and we know that the Midnight Cry is he's wormwood, and we know that the Midnight Cry is a bitter experience. And then
The Mara.
say again.
The Mara.
Yeah, it's the history of the Mara. And then the Sunday law, you have the sun, moon, and stars being brought down, and that's representing the Sunday law conflict, but also the fact that the government is fully overthrown as a republican entity.
So, you had a question?
I'm just thinking if 533 is the end of the Huns and the Vandals.
533 is the. We could draw this line, but often we would just put them as waymarks.
Okay, so we're going to say 533 to 534 will extend that time.
533 to 534 is the Vandals, then the Huns, but there's this process that's going to go on, which is what I'm trying to show here. There's this process that occurs. It's not just at one point it's a waymark, but things happen in that. So there's this these events that are occurring.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying. Wouldn't it be best then to put the beginning of the Vandals there instead of the end? Because the Vandals are not going to travel through that time of that second waymark.
So
if they're at their end,
I can redo this and just put G here and V here. That's what I'm trying to show.
I know you're doing
Yeah.
that, but the point I'm making is
I'm missing the point
you put
then.
the date of their end there at the beginning. So you can put V there, but how are they going to extend
Well-
if they end there?
There are symbols.
Do you
Or
understand what I'm
symbols.
saying? I know it's a symbol.
Oh, okay. You're saying I'm putting the end here, but maybe it should be the end. Should be there. That's what. Is that
Exactly.
I think we're looking at two different levels right now.
what? Yeah.
And I think that's where we're getting tripped up a little bit. All I was saying was this: is I've been looking at it as at a broader view, and this is the broader view. But in reality, what you're showing right now, if you put 533 is at the end of the Vandal line. So you're zooming way into that, and you're expanding that over this history because, yeah. So I don't know if they necessarily mesh on the same line. Those two trains of thought.
Okay.
So I think there might be if we look just at 533, we might see a whole line there instead of overlapping them together.
Yeah. So I think that's. Yeah. You said that before. I think, yeah.
Galina. How do you say it?
Galima.
Galima.
Gelimer. Galima.
And who is he?
He's the last king of the Vandals.
Okay.
So, Brother Corris is suggesting that this should maybe be back here because this is marking the end of them. And
It's a minor point.
yeah,
It's an observation.
I'll leave that as it is. 508 to 538. 508, the date is taken away. Where would we mark 508? I'm going to actually. I'm going to rub all of this off.
In 1999 then, I guess?
Why would you do that? Taking away the daily.
I don't have a reason yet.
Okay.
So for the line of 533, 538, where do we put the time at the end?
That's
That's what we're trying to establish right now. That's what she's trying to do anyway.
for which what? 508 or 538 or
For
533?
that whole history of 533, 534, where do we have a time at the end for that?
Oh, I'm not sure if I don't know. I don't know if each of those histories are teaching everything that's going to develop a full reform line. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I was just picking up the ideas that these things seem to be happening at this event here, and
Well,
from
508 we could put the end of paganism, and then from 508 to 538 the preparing and the rising of papalism. So there's two distinct powers, and one is going down and one is coming up.
yeah. So I'm not inclined to actually connect these two together.
They're separate lines.
I'm seeing that they're separate lines. I'm not constrained to join them together. So I'm just wondering where we'd put 508.
One thing we discussed, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, it was outside of this class, but it was Ezekiel 29 about the first day of the first month, and giving what was it? Egypt to the papacy,
Yeah.
to the king of the north. But we had this discussion about the first day of the first month. It was the vision that was given, and it was a prophecy given to a later time. Could it be connected with this 9/11 and Sunday law? That it I don't know. I had to think about it. Maybe it's not related to this, but because we recognize. I don't know. This is a whole.
I'm inclined to put 508 back here at 9/11, and my reason for that is that it says the daily's taken away, so the religion that's resisting papalism from rising is going to be finally set up. Actually, I don't know. Maybe it is Midnight Cry. It's
I've understood it as the Midnight Cry. It's
Yeah.
the setting up of the papacy, which is contrasted with the setting up of the
The
144,000.
image of the
Yeah.
beast.
The two, the counterfeits being lifted up versus the true being lifted up.
what's the logic behind that?
So at the Midnight Cry, the 144,000, or the ensign begins. That's
Okay.
a better word. Ensign begins to be lifted up, and at the same time, if in contrast, if you're putting at 508 to 538, and we know 538 is the Sunday law.
Yeah.
So that's easiest. So at that point, the papacy. In this aspect, Protestantism, in my understanding, is the daily that's being lifted up as an offering to the false priest, which would be the papacy.
I guess what? Yeah, I understood that, but where we're
Yeah.
getting the lifting up of Protestantism as something that occurred in 508, where we connecting 508 and making that into a symbol to put it into a
The
lifting,
lifting up.
Yeah,
That's Daniel 8,
verse 11.
verse 11.
Okay.
The lifting, yeah.
Okay. But that would be not a political thing then. That's more of that's going to be a religious issue. I'm not constrained by that because we weren't sure. I'm not trying to war against.
No, I
mitigate
get
against
what
that.
you're saying. I haven't dealt with the political versus religious, but at the time that the 104 or the ensign's being lifted up, you also have this, which is an offering to the Lord. You have this false offering being made at the same time, which is Protestantism or the United States, being sacrificed on the altar of the papacy, who is the understood priest in Daniel 8:11, who's receiving this sacrifice at the exact same time, which is the false Christ.
Brother Jonathan.
I had an idea why 508 at 9/11 because pagan Rome typifies United States, and the second horn of the United States is conquered at 9/11. So this is a political aspect.
That's the reason that I had all, and in
But-
Constantinople 508 also Catholicism is bringing down the emperor. I think the emperor was Anastasis, and he basically capitulates to his countrymen, and I think the story runs that he actually goes and hides for a few days because of the force that they're bringing to him. He doesn't have any ability to resist them. It all seems political, but I'm open.
Are when 508 to 538, are you putting political power as one of the aspects or the overlying aspect? Because 1843 to me doesn't have anything to do with politics. So is that one of the aspects or the primary aspect? And if so, how does 1843 have a relation to politics? Because that seems completely
I can't even remember
religious.
why we put these two dates down.
Well,
Because of the prophecy, the time prophecy starts.
1290.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Because
Yeah.
the 1335 isn't political at all.
No.
So I don't know why we have to just see political there.
Yeah. I
Okay.
see that.
Just came on my head right now because we have those prophecies lining up there. One goes to 1798, one to 1843, meaning that it actually one goes till 1989 and the other one goes till the Sunday law. There I have a reason why 508 should also be 1989 because it connects to time prophecy. And I was thinking, but I'm totally open for correction. 2 Thessalonians says, before the man of sin can be revealed, the man who's in the way, the daily which is in the way, should be taken away. So before the Sunday law can happen, what needs to come down? Communism. And I don't know how to line it up with paganism, but in 1989, that which was in the way of the papacy was taken away, and now they can start to set up and conquer the United States and set up their image. You see
I
what I
see
mean?
that.
It's
Yeah.
like the taking away is in 1989, that the one who's primary in the way is being taken away.
Let's just turn to 2 Thessalonians, because you brought that up. So we know that 2 Thessalonians was the book that William Miller used to understand what the daily was.
Another thing, sorry, we know communism was the king of the South because of atheistic friends, but at one point you always see that when the king of the North or king of the South, if they conquer the other kingdom, they, for a short period of time, it's the king of both, of the South and the North. Like for example, if the king of the North comes and conquers Egypt, he was also the king of the South for a short period of time. And we saw that the king of the South, atheistic France, conquered the king of the North at one point of time. So it could be that 1989, the communism still was like mingled together with it, and therefore can also represent paganism, the king of the North, in a sense, in one line of thought. Because in the other
Okay.
line of thought, we know it's the papacy from Daniel 11:40 to 45. Sorry.
Does everybody understand that? Some people didn't understand what you're saying.
Sorry, then just forget it. Let's go to.
Oh no,
Second
let's
No, that's not. That's
Go
a
slow.
good thought.
yeah, just if you do it, and I'll try and write it on the board what I think you're saying.
Okay,
So if I can
so
understand it, hopefully.
what I learned always in chess class was between the battle of the king of the South and the king of the North. When one king conquers the other one,
Can I
he's
just-
also the
Can
king.
I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
We've got the king of the south. Let's read the verses first, and then you explain how you're making an application of these verses.
Okay.
Let's do that first. So in 2 Thessalonians, chapter 2, and if we begin from verse 3, and we read to verse 8. Verse 3 to verse 8. So I'll begin. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition.
Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things.
Verse 6.
Verse 6. And now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time.
For the mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way.
Then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming.
So before you explain what the verse means, if we just look at these some of these verses, and just try and understand some of the wording of what's being spoken. In verse 7 it says, "For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way." So let's drop back to verse 6. Now you know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. So there's a revealing. I'm going to rub some of this off here. What do we understand the revealing to be? There's a reveal, and then it says,
Son of perdition,
um,
man of sin.
in his time. When we went to Daniel 12:11 and 11:31, it says, to place and to set up. It uses those two phrases, and my understanding was that this word reveal, it doesn't mean this in the Greek, but it's the same when we say place and set up. This is 12:11 and this is 11:31. And then in his time is when these two events happen. So I've understood that to be I've understood that to be 538.
Yeah, it's when they agree to give their kingdom to the beast, right? That's his time, when he received
Yes,
the kingdom. Yeah.
the placing or the setting up. When so I don't know if people see it that way. And in verse 7, it says, "For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, and he'll be until he be taken out of the way." So here's this. It says, I think it's 3 separate words. Taken out of the way. And those 3 words, especially the word taken, it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't mean anything in the same way that it does in these 2 places where it says take away, where we use the word sir. I've understood this to mean to cause or become I think this word just means at or out of, and this means the midst or the middle. And I've understood this to be 508. I don't know if that's how people have. Is that how most people read these verses? So he's going to be revealed in his time. His time is 538, and there's this power that's restraining or withholding him, and he's going to do that until he's taken out of the way. So this verse here, 2 Thessalonians, gives you this same time period of 508 to 538. So if that's correct, we've got 4 verses that deal with this history, at least 4 verses. We've seen 8:12. We haven't looked at 8:11 yet. We've got 11:31, 12:11, and now we've got 2 Thessalonians 2:7. This is 2 Thessalonians, and all this is Daniel. And all of these are giving 508 to 538. So, how are you reading those verses, Sister Tamina? From just the application, I know there's other ways to...
Well, we see the application from 508 to
Okay.
538, right? And now we want to put it in our timeline. And we see clearly, as Tyler mentioned already, the son-in-law is 538. So, but somebody needs... So he can be revealed in his time, somebody needs to be taken out of the way. And who was the one who was taken out of the way so papacy could rise again? And it was communism in 1989. That's my line of thought. But I have a problem there, because communism represents the king of the south, but paganism was taken away, which is the king of the north. Do you understand the problem we have here?
Unless they're symbols.
Yeah, and that's where I came up. When the king of the north conquers the south, he's the king of both. He's the king of the north and the south. And atheistic France conquered the king of the north in 1798. So in one line of
You're going too fast. You're going too fast.
I try to
You're going
be
too
slow.
fast. So you've got the king of the south, who's the USSR. He's taken away.
But in 2 Thessalonians, it takes about paganism, which is actually the king of the north.
I understand that. So,
And that's
but
a dilemma.
So that's one point that you've made here.
Yeah.
Okay, and he's taken away. Okay, so that's that.
Yes, and then, but in the literal application, it's the king of the north, which is taken away. Paganism is taken away.
So in the original it's the king of the north is taken away, and this is pagan Rome.
Exactly. So people could argue now it cannot be the communism because it's the king of the south.
Okay. And
So
pagan Rome is who?
it's the daily. It's taken away. It's the king of the north.
In our time.
Oh, in our time.
This isn't the USA?
No, it's the papacy.
But you're dealing with religion issues, you're not dealing
Oh.
with political issues.
I thought, no, there's something that's restraining the papacy from rising.
Yeah.
Isn't it
and
the USA?
That's communism.
I understand that thread, but
Okay.
because you've said it's the king of the north.
No, no. In a
Originally,
literal
508.
sense, 508,
Yeah, yeah.
the king of the north was taken away. So
Which is pagan Rome.
yes.
And who does pagan Rome represent? Doesn't it represent the United States?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, now I got you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so this is also the USA.
So in the USA was not taken away in 1989
When's that's going to happen?
as Sunday law. That's when they
It's
followed.
progressive.
9/11.
9/11,
9/11.
progressive
Yeah.
called the final one.
Because I don't think it can be, I think we can put Sunday law here because then we're going to lose this 508 to 538.
Okay.
It's progressive.
So we're going to say that this is going to happen at 9/11?
Yeah.
Or
So-
do we want to begin it earlier?
Isn't that two different powers that she's dealing with?
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying even on that line, you're saying that the one that's preventing the papacy from rising is the United States, but the United States is the armies of Rome, so we're not really preventing the papacy from rising. We're helping her to rise. So it must be another power that's preventing the papacy from rising.
Well, doesn't it depend what thread? If you go back to the original history,
Okay.
the original history is pagan Rome is stopping the papacy from rising, but it's pagan Rome that's going to assist
By the
it
armies.
to
Okay,
rise.
You're right. Yep. You're right.
So the dynamics here, you've got this someone falling on their own sword,
Okay.
is exactly what's happening now. Brother Jonathan.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say is, I don't see the king of the south is the daily and taken away.
That's the thing. That's
Because
the dilemma.
if we add Revelation 13:2, the dragon, the daily, the pagan Rome, lifts up or gives his power, seat, and authority to the papacy.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why I would say we have to consider this characteristic into our thoughts, that the king of the south, USSR, didn't give its seat, its power, and all the stuff to the papacy. So I would recommend, or I would say it's anyhow the USA.
Brother Chris.
I'm obviously here to learn. So, based on my understanding, it was the attribute of the waymark that defines the waymark. Like, you can hear so many conspiracy theories about 9/11 that there was bombs already in there, and we're not going to go into the intricacies of that. The fact that Islam was restrained at 9/11 proves that there's a restraint. Likewise, with this, the fact that there was a taken away, not to enforce what Tamina is saying per se, but it's the attribute that we're really looking at. Based on the understanding that I had, it was the attribute.
So you want to pick up more of the withholding, the restraining.
Basically. But I'm here to learn.
Okay, independent of everything that's going on around it. So you're picking up the word
it's
restrained,
more of the attribute of what happened.
not who's
versus-
being restrained.
No, the who's being restrained was an example. Like, for 9/11, the fact that Islam was restrained, although there were conspiracy theories. Likewise with 1999, the fact that there was a falling away or...
I can see your hand. Brother Tyler.
Skip.
Skip. Sister Bromley.
On one level, as a symbol, that we recognize that the king of the south is Egypt, and Egypt represents Sodom and the two-horned power. I can't think of the one Revelation calls it.
Sodom and Egypt.
Sodom and Egypt,
Yeah.
yeah, so two-horned power. So then, from there, then we apply it to the United States.
Okay.
So then that makes you want to bring it back up to 9/11. So I don't know how, but yet it's the king of the South. Do you see? You got a king of the South in 1989, but yet you can apply that to 9/11 too. So I don't know how you would fix that in her diagram.
Carry on. How are you going to fix this?
First of all, I want to mention that Sarah understood me, and maybe it's because we're both blonde or something that we
Sorry,
think the same.
she understood this because you're blonde.
She got it. So, but,
Sister Sarah, you're going to explain this because you're blonde. No, she's
but
not
Johnny
gonna do that.
addressed the dilemma which can be raised. That 1989, paganism was taken away, but the communism is not the king of the north in that sense in our timeline, because we always see that the king of the north is either papacy or represented as paganism as the United States. So I wanted to marry that up, and I do have a solution. I'm sorry that I'm so complicating explaining it.
In 1989, no, you're saying paganism is taken away.
Yes.
So what are you defining paganism as?
And I define in 1989, I define paganism as communism. The reason, and I see
Based
the
upon
problem,
what?
because normally paganism represents the United States, but the United States was not taken away in 1989. So that's the dilemma we have. And I want to show why the king of the South can be representing paganism, the king of the North in 1989.
So you're going to show us why the king of the South equals paganism.
Or the king of the North in 1989. In one line of thought, because we normally teach it others, right?
And the king of the north.
It can represent king of the South and king of the North at the same time.
In the same line.
Okay, so just when we go back to the history, when you say king of the North, 508 is the history is the Visigoths and those powers that are warring. So it's that specific history that you're going to show us, who's a representation of pagan Rome, because the Visigoths are one of the horns on the iron beast of Daniel 7.
I want to show why king of the South can be also king of the North in one point. Because when Nebuchadnezzar came and conquered the king of the South, he was the king of the North, but ruling also over the king of the South. At one point, when they conquer the other nation, they represent both. And what I want to see, and Jeff uses this to teach, I got it from him. And 1798, the king of the South conquered the king of the North. So at that point, he was the king of both, the North and the South. So he could represent both at that time. And technically, the king of the North hasn't come. Yeah, okay.
So you're saying that France in 1798 becomes the king of the North?
Both.
And he's already the king of the South anyway.
Exactly.
But he takes the title of the king of the North as well.
Therefore, he's also ruling over the North, right? So in 1989, communism, which is the king of the South, technically is also the king of the North in one line of thought at that point. So when we say taken away, the king of the North, the paganism, pagan Rome is taken away, can be represented by communism in this line of thought.
Because communism is the king of the North.
Yeah, because it conquered
took that title in 1798.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay. So whether you agree, does everybody understand the logic?
Yeah. But I see that only in this line of thought, because when you look at Daniel 11, 40-45, we know that there's different truth. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
It's just the line of truth from 508 to 538 in this line.
Brother Jonathan.
Sorry.
No, I'm trying to grab. So the king of the North is going to take his title back. He's going to.
In the line of thought where we try to marry up 508 taken away to 538, where he is going to reveal himself in our timeline, I say that paganism, the communism was taken away in 1989 till Sunday law where papacy is set up. But we know that from Daniel 11, 40-45, I would draw another line. We know that the papacy is the king of the North, and he pushes against or overcomes the king of the North in 1989.
King of the South.
King of the South. So I don't want that people think that throughout the line that communism is the king of the North. I'm just saying that at this line of truth, from the taken away, that communism can represent the king of the North.
Brother Jonathan. Sister Tanya.
I wanted to point out that in Daniel 2, the religions of Babylon, the religion of Medo-Persia, of Grecia, pagan Rome, they're all basically a type of paganism. And it's basically the taking away that was done in 1989. Communism is a form of paganism because you basically are worshiping self. So this is more of a battle of removing religion's things than actually than the state. So I kind of see a little bit of mingling of state and religion mingled in one, but we have to be specific. Or is it taking away a state entity, or is it a religion entity taken away?
Religion.
So when we're dealing with religion, living in communism, the religion of communism, you had no God, you believe in no God, but basically you believed in self. So it was a form of paganism. So what Tamina's saying is, it's true. What was taken away was basically the religion of communism that did not allow Catholicism to rise up in those countries. They had no entrance.
Brother Gabriel.
I was just wondering, in regard to what Tamina said, that if defeating automatically means taking the title, because I think it somehow has to fulfill the same characteristics also. I don't know if defeating is enough to overtake the title also.
So you're disagreeing with what she's saying? Or?
I'm just questioning.
Yeah, I don't mean in a... Brother Colin. I don't think I understood what your point you're making. Sorry.
France defeating the King of the North,
yes.
Does this automatically mean that now France is fulfilling all the characteristics of the King of the North, or did they just defeat the King of the North and so the king is defeated now, but doesn't actually mean that now France is occupying the position of the King of
So the point you're making is that, which is different to what she's saying, is when you bring down the King of the South, that doesn't make you the King of the South, you don't take their title. So that when you get to Daniel 8 verse 9, in 31 BC here, that pagan Rome doesn't take the title for the King of the South. The King of the South just fades out of history.
We had a similar situation yesterday with the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths, which came to help the other one, and at the end they retreated. They didn't actually occupy Rome, and by that Rome was winning. So we said just because they retreated.
Okay, so I've seen both of your hands, but I just want to, Sister Tamina, so you understand what he's saying? He's saying just because you take the title, it doesn't make you. It doesn't give you that. Just because you destroy that nation, it doesn't give you the authority to do that. So in 1798, because that's the logic that you're using. The 1798.
I'm using Jeff's logic.
Well, no, you're using your logic.
No, Jeff teaches that.
Yeah. No, I'm not arguing that point. I'm just. All I'm just saying, the logic that I understood that you're using is that in 1798, France, the King of the South, takes down the papacy, therefore it grabs its title, so it becomes the King of the North as well as being King of the South, and then in 1989, the King of the North is going to take that title back from him. So if that's correct, then we'd have to say that in AD 31, and I'm not saying it's not correct, I'm just saying we'd have to follow that principle all the way through. In AD 31, when pagan Rome takes down Egypt, then it too would be called the King of the South. So from AD 31, from 31 BC, all the way to 1798, I think because I don't think the King of the South comes in the story after that. Then the King of the North, the papacy, is also the King of the South.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, I haven't thought about that, but that's what you'd end up having to.
But I wouldn't say that that France just took the complete title away from the papacy and they were the King of the North now. I wouldn't address it in this way because the papacy is the King of the North. It only got a wound and it's going to be healed at the Sunday law again. I'm just saying that in 1798 when France conquered it can represent both in that sense. During the history of the deadly wound, France can represent both the south and the north, just because it conquered it. But I'm not saying that primarily it's always going to be the king of the south.
I understand that. But
And it doesn't necessarily take the characteristics of the king of the north. I'm just saying from the logic, by conquering another nation, by conquering the south or the north, you rule the south or the north.
Brother Colin first.
After the time period of the cross is spiritual. So what Tamina is saying, it can fly as long as you stay in 31 BC. Rome conquer Syria.
Conquers Egypt in 31 BC, so it becomes the king of the south.
He becomes the king of the south, literally, no problem. After the time period of the cross is spiritual. Wherever atheism is, that's the king of the south. So the best thing we should do is like what Tina says. France are atheistic, the age of reasoning, it's Gadal, it's paganism on one level. Simply, we can just use that alone and plug it into what we're plugging it into. We're trying to do all this matching up here. I don't think it's. I disagree.
With what?
We're trying to match up the king of the south by like literally because who conquered who. So now the papacy now is the king of the south now.
If we don't go back into the history and see who literally does what, you don't have a historical basis to make a prophetic application.
I'm not denying who literally does what, you know.
I thought that's what.
I'm saying no. I'm saying it's spiritual now.
Part of the concern that I have, or the thoughts that I have, not concern, is that when we make the taking away of the daily, we just make it this concept or principle of an ism, as opposed to a nation that's actually being taken down. We know that this is correct, that pagan Rome was dealt a wound, and pagan Rome is a nation state, and so the logic of this fits right through this history. But when we start making it the king of the south is taken away, then we have to do this thing that Sister Tamina is suggesting, that you have to say when you take a kingdom, then you take its title. So right through here, the papacy has got pagan Rome has got the title for the king of the south. And then in 1798, there's another king of the south that comes up. So you've got essentially two king of the souths, one legitimate one, which is France, and one that's already got that title. So somehow or another, you're going to have to take the title that the papacy had and give it back to somebody. You have to juggle that around, just the concept that you're taking titles from one to another without any battle or anything occurring. You're just saying, well, you're actually legitimately the king of the south, but he's the king of the south as well. Brother Fabo.
I'm just wondering if you recap what it is that we're doing.
What are we doing? We're looking at these time periods, these setting up periods. We looked at 533 to 538, and now we looked at 508 to 538. And we're trying to put 508 on this line. Where do we put 508? Here, here, or here? Because we know we put 538 here. So to know where you put 508, you have to look at the characteristics of what's happening. So some of the characteristics we're saying is that in 508, well, the primary one is the daily is taken away. And if you go back into the history of 508, at least 3 things have happened. Arthur's converted. He's the last of all these horns that are opposing. The Visigoths are subjugated, and the Goths make a treaty with Rome through Clovis. And in Constantinople, the people are rising up and asserting their authority against the state power, and they're saying, we're the ones who are actually in control. So all of those events that are occurring are 508, and we need to get some kind of prophetic or antitypical application of those things so we know where to place them. But when we think about 508, we've got the verses 8:12, 11:31 and 12:11. All of those 3 things are talking about the Visigoth subjugation. But 2 Thessalonians also gives this idea of what's happening, because 2 Thessalonians doesn't just say that pagan Rome's going to be hindering the papacy until 538, because it gives this idea that the revealing of his time is 538, but it uses this concept of take away. Now the takeaway in the Greek is nothing near the takeaway that's in the Hebrew in Daniel. But if you take what we spoke about, this loose, I'm smiling, this loose way of doing line upon line, then we know that this takeaway is lining up with these. So the taking away that's being spoken of here, if you're going to use the same concept that you did in these three verses, it becomes 508. So you have someone who's hindering in 508, 530. So we've got these four verses. So the reason we're looking at all of this is where we're going to place 508. You have to pick up characteristics. And Sister Tamina said, the person who's taken away in our story, in our history, when you go to Daniel 11, 40 to 45, is the USSR. King of the South is taken away. So she wants to turn the King of the South at one level into paganism, which at one level is the King of the North. And the way she's doing that is by, in 1798, the King of the South, France, goes to Rome and takes his title. So at one level it's the King of the North, it's paganism, and then in 1989 the reverse happens. And all I was pointing at is if you do that, then you have to be able to go back and show that that same thing happens in 31 BC, when Rome takes the title from Egypt, and so Rome is also the King of the South all the way through this history up to 1798. So it's not just once you're doing it, you're going to have to do that twice. So that's where we're kind of, if that makes any sense. We're trying to identify how do you place 508. I've got lots of hands, but Brother Gabriel, I think, was...
Just shortly, the problem I see with that is how long does the power that has taken the title now keep this title? So because otherwise you would have two kings of the north for a certain time, because papacy is recovering and in some moment occupies the title of king of the north again, right?
Okay. Brother Marco.
From Daniel 11, we learned that the papacy has to conquer 3 geographical areas. King of the South is only one, and there are 2 more to come. So is this already the taking away that opens him the way to be established? There will be the United States who have to be removed. There will be the world that has to fall, and then is 538 in one sense really effective. So I have a problem to connect this falling away with just one of the players who has to be removed, who has to fall.
Okay,
you
so
what I mean?
Yeah, so the way I think we spoke about these verses here, it says 508, it marks a specific taking away, and then there's this, it says I said it in order for this setting up. So there's this time periods, things have to happen. It gives the beginning and the ending of this period, but things are happening in between. And so I think this is answers to what Brother Tyler was saying. We marked, if this is correct, we're marking here, but there's a progression of things that are going on here. It's not just one thing. So I don't know if you're addressing the issue, where do we start this? Are you saying you can start it here, or are you saying you can start it here?
So far, we don't like the term. We often ask, are we stressing this? And I think this time we can really apply it. It seems to be quite a stretch to get this working, so at the moment. And I don't feel so comfortable about it.
Stretching what? You don't feel comfortable about what?
The idea of
What do you think? How do you read these verses?
Oh, I'm not there yet. I have a question mark. I don't know.
Okay, so are you saying it's a stretch to do this? It's a stretch to do this, you mean?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
For me, it is. There are many points I see that work out very well, but there are other, it's not. I'm not comfortable yet.
Okay, but this isn't a stretch, or?
I have not reached the
Okay.
You know, I don't know.
I'm just trying to understand.
We haven't found the solution yet. I think for me, this so far it seems quite a stretch.
The whole thing?
Yeah, whatever we put at 508 in our time so far, for me, it's a stretch.
Okay. Brother Jonathan.
If we look in the timeline 508, 538, in order for the papacy to rule in 538, it's not only paganism then is to be taken away in 508, we also have to consider the 3 horns that were plucked up. So, where do you mark the 3 horns in our timeline?
I think what I'm reticent to do is overlay the 3 horns into this history here. It's another line of truth, because what we'd end up doing is, if we're going to lay them, if we're going to try and join them together, we'd have to be doing this. We'd have to say there's 1 horn, then there's 508, then there's the second, and then there's the third. If we're going to line up the taking out of the 3 horns with this setting up period here, and then I think if you did that, you'd end up funneling yourself to say, well, if we've got what looks to be, you can already see 4 things, and then I think you're automatically going to say 508 would be 9/11, because we know this is Sunday law. And then if we've got 3 right, you're going to put Midnight Cry, 9/11, 1989. You could end up doing that, but I don't think that's the correct way of, as far as I understand it, is I think we should be looking at 508 to 538, which is one truth, and then the taking down of the 3 horns is another truth, or another line of investigation. I don't think if we combine them, we're going to end up getting the right answer, because different people are doing different work. This is Clovis, and this is Eastern Rome. So I'm not. What do you think, Brother Ty? You think we can combine? I'm trying to keep those 2 lines separate, just as I am with this one. So separate. They're all separate.
Yeah, I agree with you about keeping them separate. Yeah, I agree with that.
But this was not my question.
Oh, I misunderstood your question.
Because
Sorry.
I wouldn't put them together too.
Okay.
But my question was not about 508. Where do we put the 3 horns?
Where do you put the 3 horns?
3 geographical obstacles in 538 need to be overcome.
Okay, so the 3 geographical areas, we're going to put 1, 2, and 3.
So
how we do
how can 538 be the Sunday law when we know that the papacy rules in supremely at the Sunday law?
Because he
Just
sort of
different
rules
lines.
supremely.
But part of the problem for that, I'm going to... You say first.
What I've understood, and this is still not an answered question, I guess, but in a lot of ways it seems like the threefold union comes together at the Sunday law on many levels, but you also have that succession where you have to see some that 2 where the 2 and the 3 are right now, but in a lot of ways 2 and 3 are combined.
I would have actually put the 3 here, but I didn't because of that issue. We know at 9/11 you've got the threefold union. Psalms 48 can show us that. And we know here that the United States is going to fall from 1798, the days of one king takes you to the Sunday law. So once the United States falls, then you're going to be in the reigning of the 10 kings of Revelation 17. So once the second horn is gone, then the third one is Egypt, verse 42, Daniel 11:42. You've got Egypt, but Egypt is going to start reigning in this time period here, in a Sunday law period. So this is a time period where Egypt's going to be reigning. So we mark the completion of that as being the close of probation or the end, but they rule 1 hour with the beast or with the woman, depending on how. I guess what I'm trying to say is you can put 3 right here. There is a strong argument to show you that this ruling happens all at once, because we teach, if this is close of probation, and we're saying, this is the last of the last Sunday laws that's going to occur, they don't even have any time to do anything afterwards, because by the time all the Sunday laws have been made and you've got right to the end, everything finishes up. So they don't actually have any time to do anything. So this ruling that we talk about is in this time period. So the 3 really actually starts to come here. If we're going to say, if we're going to say a point in the period, I know we like saying that, and I'm not saying we're wrong to say that, but I don't want to say that just to sort of cover up the intricacies of it, or to say we can't explain it. This ruling for 1 hour is in this time period, not post close of probation. So you can bring the 3 back down to
What
here.
do you mark with Sunday law? Do you mark the Sunday law in the United States?
This is
or
USA.
The universal.
So this is part of the problem. When we mark it this way as waymarks, we're going to say the USA, then universal or worldwide. What actually is happening is this is the beginning. All of this is just Sunday law in one level.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do the point in the period. This is all Sunday law, and the Sunday law begins here. So the 3 gets stretched back to here, because you've got 100+ Sunday laws that are all going to be occurring. You know, even if they do it at the United Nations, they say everybody's going to keep Sunday law. There's going to be progression.
So, okay, but if we talk in the language of Daniel 11, 40 to 45, we say verse 40 in 1989, verse 41 at the Sunday law, and
Verse 42.
okay, and then you shrink that together again to the Sunday law, the
Yeah.
verse 42 and verse.
Because verse 42, it says all the countries.
Yeah,
So
that's the point.
yeah, the countries must begin here. It's one country after another.
Okay, so you have solved the problem with the three horns plugged up till 538.
Yeah.
Okay, then we just have to look for 508.
So if that's done to your satisfaction, you can bring this up.
Yeah, I mean satisfaction is something else, but I can
Okay.
I can understand your logic.
Did we have any hands up for a while? Did anybody have any hands up ages ago? I thought you did.
My concern is that we're combining, when we're looking at some of these things, the political aspect and the religious aspect of these powers. And I think it's important that in some of these lines we make sure and separate those, because we know in 1798 there was a wound given to the political aspect, but the church itself continued forward. So I think in 508, when we're looking at paganism, it's not like you're going to have the end of spiritualism. It's sometimes I think we need to start considering the political aspect and setting aside the religious aspect to know how to label these things correctly.
Are you inferring that we could have 508 at 2 different places?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it sounded like. No, yeah.
Okay, that's just a thought though.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Which is what I think Brother Coldis was saying about all of this thing. You know, can't we have...
But I don't know how to think it all the way through yet.
Okay. System.
That's exactly what I was going to say in the light of the churches and the seals.
Okay.
I think that we need to distinctly point out and instead of just mixing them both at the same time, I think that we need to line up the church, just like, I mean, the way we have it, you know, the churches and the seals representing the internal, the external, one is political, one is religion. And also, Papal Rome, you know, she's a church, but she doesn't become a power until she creates fornication. And she begins to win over political power on her side in order for her to take over. And so from that light, we have to see that throughout the history, how Papal Rome is moving, trying to conquer political power, her getting in bed and then winning and be able to transfer her religion into that state. Because it's all about a religion fight. It's either the religion of heaven or the religion of Satan.
I don't know if Brother Marco was saying this or not, but and I think just thinking about it, I don't know if it goes back to what Brother Jonathan's saying. If we Daniel 11:44, when it says take away, not take away. How are you phrasing? So you're making this take away the king of the south. But the king of the south is the issue of the 3 horns, isn't it? The king of the south is the story of the 3 horns in the context. But the story of 508, that taking away, I don't think that's connected to the story of the 3 horns. So I don't know if we're subtly combining these things, which is I think what I've put here. The way I kind of have approached this in the past, and I'm struggling to get out of this thinking, is that when you go back to the history of 508, this is Catholicism. Catholicism is saying I'm going to go into a church-state relationship with somebody, and that church-state relationship he's going to go into is with Clovis. And Clovis is going to do a work for him. And that work that Clovis does is, first of all, converts himself, changes his own religion, and then he makes sure that everybody who had the same religion as him gets converted as well. And I think that's why I'm struggling to see the King of the South in this story, about just the historical context and how we make an application. So I'd have to jump through some hoops because I can see this, but this story here is the story of the plucking of the 3 horns. And I don't know if that's a different line of thought than 508.
Can we study that on Sunday?
Yes.
Clearly,
I think you've got fractals going on in here. They need
I don't understand, yeah. Matt.
I was gonna say, you was onto something yesterday when you spoke about you got Catholicism, and they need to get rid of Arianism, paganism, and monophysitism. Yeah. And then when you go in modern Rome, they've got to get rid of Protestantism, well, America, but it's isms against atheism, Protestantism, and spiritualism to establish Catholicism. So it is isms that they need to get rid of. And I think if we started in the 508 and looked at what you was pointing out yesterday, we could have had a better we could have probably had more links. I think you was onto something when you was bringing out the different religions.
Yeah, but that's this line.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering if you can how you do that with 508.
Well, we are dealing with religion. I mean, with different types of. In 508, paganism is a form of religion.
But we're bringing in the political stuff, and it's kind of clouding.
We can't. We have to separate them.
We have to, or we...
No, we do. In order, like Sister Brown was saying, we're mingling 2 lines right here. We have to keep the political part apart and the religion part apart.
Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy towards us as we grapple with these lines, Father, thoughts and ideas that we thought that we understood. We ask and pray that you would give us wisdom, help us to meditate on these thoughts through our workday, that we might have a clearer understanding of your word. Father, we know that there are probably things that we don't understand or are not seeing. Therefore we ask, Lord, that the Holy Spirit that he would be willing, Lord, to reveal some truths to us so that we might begin to have a clearer understanding of where we place this date, this event in our own history. We ask and pray these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.